Hey Set Free, thanks for joining me again this Tuesday. I would like to say that unfortunately, for a little while here, this might be the last one of these, the last Bible study that we do this Tuesday, mostly because we're actually going to be starting up live services again. And I'm going to be preaching Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock. And I know that people are going to be getting what service they're going to be going to in a little while, so I know some of you will probably be there. We will be posting those sermons online, and while I get into the habit of writing those sermons and still doing work and everything else that I'm doing, I'm not going to be really having time to do these. But maybe in the future, I'll be able to come back to these. I still don't know exactly what sermon I'm going to be preaching. I may go back to my James. I may actually continue with the Hebrews. And one of my thoughts actually is if I continue the Hebrews, maybe we can do a Bible study on the Hebrews portion that I'm going to be doing the next week. And we can do a study as I am studying that passage for the sermon that next week, which would be kind of fun. And then we can get feedback, and I might be able to work some of that feedback into the sermon, which would be really fun. So I just wanted to let you know this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have enjoyed it as well. I would love to see your comments, and we'll see where it goes in the future. But for this week, we have verses 5 through, I don't remember exactly, 5 and following in chapter 2 of Hebrews. And let's go ahead and get into those and see what God has for us this week. For it was not to angels that God subjected the world to come, of which we are speaking. It has been testified somewhere. What is a man that you are mindful of him, or the son of man that you care for him? You made him for a little while lower than the angels. You have crowned him with glory and honor, putting everything in subjugation under his feet. Now, in putting everything in subjugation to him, he left nothing outside of his control. At present, we do not yet see everything in subjection to him. But we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. I went a little longer there because it does continue through that. We have here again another Old Testament verse, which we are going to go back and look at. It's actually one of my more favorite Psalms. But this is, again, a continuation of what we've seen before. We can see that first off in the first word of verse 5, which says for, or some translations therefore, which both of those are referring to everything that just happened again and continuing through. If I can turn the page. So we see what we've just gone through last week. We need to pay closer attention to what we've heard so that we don't drift away from it. And how can we, having seen such a great salvation, turn away from it? Because of that, and because of before Jesus being greater than angels, we have another question. Wasn't it? Well, was it not to the angels that God subjected the world to come? Actually, no, I'm reading that wrong. We have a statement. For, given all of this, it was not to angels that God gave the world to come. And then evidence of these things. So if Jesus isn't better than angels, then this. In fact, the author of Hebrews is arguing that God has put us, in some respects, in some regards, higher than angels. For a little while lower, and then in the ages to come, he's going to give us a position of power, actually over that of angels. which for me actually makes me feel somewhat uncomfortable, because I like to be a number 2. With some authority maybe, but mostly authority of somebody else, and standing alongside someone and helping that go forward is one of the places I enjoy being, which is honestly for me been a struggle in my marriage, because I like to naturally be a number 2, whereas in the marriage God has set me as the leader, and so some struggles there for me. But in the future He's going to set us up above there. And for all of those of you who feel like me that they enjoy being a number 2, just remember, we are God's number 2. In everything that He's doing in our lives, He's giving the orders to us to carry out for Him. So we are His number 2. So we know it wasn't to angels that God has given the world to. In fact, God hasn't given land to the angels. He hasn't given those responsibilities. He's given them responsibilities, but typically they are warfare in the spiritual realm. We see that in Daniel and in Revelation. And then He also gives them messengerial roles. I do believe angel is messenger. So they deliver messages for God to us. But that's not authority. The authority they carry is God's authority. And then we have the Psalms passage. And let's go ahead and turn there, which is Psalms 8. We're going to read the whole psalm, not just verses 4 through 6, which are what's referenced in Hebrews chapter 2. Partially because I love the psalm. It's a fun psalm. And also because it's short and it helps us to understand this all better. Verse 1, O Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You've set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babes and infants you have established strength because of your foes, to still the enemy and the avenger. When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? Yet you have made him a little lower than heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. You have given him dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, and also the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens and the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. One of the things I think of every time I read this psalm or hear this psalm is the hymn, Lord, O Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth, which is a fun hymn that I enjoy. And then the whole psalm is just worship. It's just praising God the entire time. And honestly, I love anything that lifts up God, that rejoices in who He is, that magnifies Him and gives Him glory and honor. So we see this. We see the verses that were directly taken out of here. What is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him? You've made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor, and given him dominion over the works of your hands. Now the author of Hebrews uses this to talk specifically about Jesus. What is man that you are mindful of him, or the Son of Man, typically referring to Jesus, that you care for him. In the second part of verse 8 we see, now I'm putting everything in subjection to him, Jesus. He left nothing outside of his control. At present, we don't see everything in subjection to him. Currently, we don't see this. I forgot. Currently, we don't see everything in subjection to Jesus, but we can look forward to see this. If we look at the gospel, that's a big portion of the gospel that we see in this passage. His future coming as king, his future kingship. So we don't see everything then, subjection. And for a little while, we see him who for a little while was made lower than the angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor because of the suffering of death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. Again, gospel, salvation. He was made lower than the angels for a short time, so that way he could die for us, so that we don't have to. And then he will be glorified and magnified and sit on the throne and be our king. And he is the one who is going to open the scrolls in Revelation and judge the earth, because he is the one who is most qualified to do so. While God the Father, yes, is qualified to do so, he is just and fully capable of judging the world. God chooses to go one step further and have Jesus be the one who judges, because Jesus is the one who came down to earth. Jesus is the one who experienced life as a human. Jesus is the one who went through that temptation and didn't sin. Jesus is the one who went all the way to the cross because of love for us, even though we don't deserve it. And he's the one who died, taking all of the sins upon himself. We can't even comprehend how awful that must have felt. Just that portion of time when he's on the cross and all of our sin is laid on his shoulders. You have to remember he's a being that has never sinned. He hates sin entirely. In every form he hates sin. And now, for this short time, even though it's a short time, it must have felt almost like an eternity to have all the sins, past, present, and future, placed on him so that he can pay for them. And with all that sin, a separation from God the Father and God the Holy Spirit. A separation from himself out of love. So that he can conquer death and raise to heaven. So the author of Hebrews here is bringing in the gospel, not sliding it in, but stating it there. This, if we think back to last week's passage, this is the great salvation that once we see, we can't turn away from. How can you turn away from that love? How can you leave Jesus hanging on the cross with your sin on his shoulders and say, you know, my life is a little bit too hard as a Christian. I understand you did that and that's really cool, but I would rather live my life. How can we do that? There's so many stories, if we look back in history, of somebody who is saved just physically, pushed out of the way of a truck, or pushed out of the way of a bullet, or somebody steps in to fight off something for them and they have a life debt, a life for a life. Where are we in that? We owe Jesus a life. He gave up his for us. We owe him the same. Is Christianity works-based? No. Our entrance into heaven isn't based on us working for it. He doesn't demand it. But it is right. It should be expected of us to give our life for him because he gave his for us. It's perfectly reasonable to expect. This is why in times in the New Testament we see my life is not mine, but it's his. Paul says to live is Christ and to die is gain. We should have that same mentality. Something I found while studying this is if we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15. The Psalms passage is referenced. If we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, that Psalms passage is referenced. If we go to verse 27, it says, "For God has put all things in subjugation under his feet." But when it says all things are put in subjugation, it is plain that he is accepted who put all things in subjugation under him. When all things are subjected to him, the Son himself will also be subjected to him who put all things in subjugation under him, that God may be all in all. So he is above all. God and Jesus are above us, and we can't take these passages out of context to say, well, it says he put man in charge of everything, like it says in Genesis. No, that's true. He did put us in charge of the world. He made the world, and he gave us the world to take care of for him. He gave us work. He gave Adam work. But since he put us in charge, he's still in charge. I look forward to seeing you guys on Saturday. And if you're not in my group on Saturdays, then when we can finally meet together as a complete body, I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for joining me this time and in other times. You guys have a great day and a good week.